on this wonderful Wednesday, July 15, 2020, as the political economic watch and conversation continues in Nigeria. Let us give you a lineup of what we'll be looking at today. Our WebTV exclusive interview with Mr. Bismark Rewane, economist and CEO of financial derivatives company and member of the Presidential Economic Advisory Committee. A summary of the National Bureau of Statistics COVID-19 Impact Monitoring Reports for June 2020, and Silicon's perspective on CBN's order to seize funds of loan defaulters across banks. So let's begin with the interview. Mr. Bismark Rewane is a featured economist, analyst, and well-known across the country, and has featured on various platforms speaking on economic issues. We had him to discuss the second half of this year, critical issues around the economy and what to expect, policies have been taken, new market-driven approaches that will have impact on the populace and how they can navigate them. Let's take a listen to this interview and get back to it. I just want to get your insights around this challenge of balancing health and economy amidst the COVID-19 pandemic and the revised budget, and then combined with how the ESP can really help stabilize the nation's fiscal and monetary policy space this period of Nigeria's management.
First and foremost, it's not that the reality is that we have a budget which has been revised twice since the budget was submitted in December. What has happened is that we used a benchmark, first of all, of 57, then went to a benchmark of 35, I believe, and then we now went back. We went to a benchmark of 25 and now 28. Yeah. Now, what this shows is that the policymakers are not oblivious of the realities that are facing us. We have a drop in oil price, a cut again in oil production, including condensates. And also the fact is that we also are attacked by the pandemic. So what has happened is that the cutback in expenditure is much lower than the cutback in revenue. So our revenues are falling quite sharply, while our expenditure has been cut back only moderately. The implications of this is that we now are facing a situation where our fiscal deficit for the year is going to increase. But that's to be expected, and that's happening to all the countries in the world. And how we're funding this, we are funding this quite efficiently by one, World Bank, IMF, and multilateral support, concessionary loans over a long period. But the problem with that is that in the next few years, when you need concessionary money, you would have exhausted all avenues of exhaustion, and then you would have no choice but to go back into the commercial markets, which are more expensive. But the good news is that the multilateral agencies are insisting on some form of economic reform, which Nigeria has embarked upon, principally cost-reflective tariffs in electricity, an exchange rate regime that is reflective of market realities, and finally, the subsidy regime in petroleum products. I think we've addressed many of those things. Have we addressed them totally? No, we have not. But at least we've made the first move. The first move is to accept the reality that our prices are subsidized. Two is that we are determined to exit the subsidy regime. And three is to come up with a program to execute this.
Okay, Mr. Bismark, now, several years ago, I know you spoke at the Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers conference, which we were privileged to be there, yes. And you talked about monetary policy being a very critical player in shaping the lives of people. I mean, it could wipe off a class of people, like you said, if not managed effectively. At this point, looking at the monetary policy direction of the country and the fact that we're going to see at the FX management a move towards unification of the rates, what would you see as the wide impact on the populace and the economy?
No, quite frankly, there's no time that, you see, the price mechanism has a way of self-adjusting. And so to manage prices is the most difficult and futile exercise in economics. But having said that, the exchange rate has been managed all these years, and we've achieved nothing except creating distortions to our resources. What has happened now is that the central bank has finally accepted that it has to do something about the mechanism, exchange rate determining mechanism. But the fact that you're determined to do it doesn't mean that you did correctly. So we are the detail. The devil is in the detail. So we will have to watch out and see how this exercise is being carried out. But definitely, the fact that you come out overtly to say that you will work towards unifying rates, you will try to reduce the multiplicity of rates that exist, and that you will it will help sure that the economy grows. How does that happen? Because investors know that the exchange rate is now market determined, they will be more incentivized to bring in money. Nigerian diaspora flows will increase, local savings will increase, and you will see a raft of economic activities. I think that is what is likely to happen.
Mr. Bismark, when we look at second half of the year, key developments that will shape the economy, like we rightly quoted from the FDC report published on ProShare, the implications of these policies, like the PMS adjustments, the gas pricing adjustments, even down to the electricity tariff, will have a wide impact on the populace and the Nigerians. How can there be a balance in ensuring that policy levers reduces the adverse impact it will have on the populace while you're now moving to a more market-based approach in different layers of these policy responses?
The short-term impact is tactical. That is, your response is tactical. If you go to a market-determined exchange rate, if you reflect the price of gas and the price of electricity, if you withdraw subsidies from petroleum products, those are structural changes. Structural changes take time to manifest themselves. But once you've adjusted, once you've got over the initial shock, then the economy and people will be in self-adjustment mode. That is what this is all about. It's understanding the difference between long-term imperatives and short-term tactical challenges. And to be honest with you, there's no time. You only kick the can down the road. There's no time that you're not going to have to make that adjustment. And whenever you're going to make that adjustment, you are going to have to absorb the shocks. You may not like, you may be afraid of taking injections. But if that's the only solution you have, or to have liverqueen injection to solve your malaria because your temperatures have gone out of the roof, you will have no choice but to take it. Is it painful? Yes. Or is that the only way? Yes. But after the pain comes again. So I don't think we can't be afraid of the pain, but yet we want the gain.
And then, Mr. Bismark, when we look at Nigeria's economic management, there's been a lot of debate around the best approach. Some say we need a development state model. Some say we need to look at a free market model, and others even talk of a social welfareist approach. Looking at your statements over the years, your insights on ensuring that we balance policy and, of course, ensure that the households are positively impacted, what, from your perspective over the years, is the best approach Nigeria can take now to even lift millions from poverty?
Well, I'm one that believes strictly in a mixed economic model. I don't believe in state approach. I don't believe that the dogma of economic patriotism is fast. It's, way outmoded. It's no longer, those are dogmatic, outmoded principles of economics. What is required today is a practical approach. Whether we like it or not, social media and information technology has made information flow, make markets more perfect than they were. So the restrictions and the barriers to entry and the asymmetric information created by the former system have all failed. So now, whether you like it or not, there's a free market because of information flow. You can get information instantaneously everywhere in the world, right? There's a global market. So accepting that reality, that one of the key ingredients of free markets is perfect information, and that perfect information is here to stay with us, then why don't we just go the whole hog? and accept that this is what it is. And they are the profits that are made from these free markets are adequately taxed. And that the government, because of its revenue, will have to provide social safety nets and supports, right? So that's why you're hearing about palliatives. And so going back to the ideological divide between free markets and statist economic principles, it's now more stark that people have to be in the middle, where the state will intervene to support the underprivileged and the poor and create opportunities for everybody, whilst those that are skilled and have the opportunity will make money and pay the adequate share of taxes.
Mr. Bismark, as we begin to wind down, let me just ask you, because beginning of this year, we had the privilege of engaging you at the Nigeria British Chamber of Commerce breakfast meeting looking at the year, and you mentioned some sectors that will be really, really the big thing, and agriculture is among them and still remains. So getting the best of your insight and analysis, who are going to be the gainers and the losers in the second half of the year? And are there sectors that will need real intervention, for example, like the aviation?
Well, the truth is that the economy is in shock. Everybody loses because the economy is under an attack by this pandemic and other supply chain disruptions. But also, every sector or most sectors have an opportunity to reinvent themselves and adapt very widely. So, again, sectors that are innovative, innovation intensive, sectors that have that there's a lot of adaptive capacity, sectors that are able to migrate from their standard model of doing business to the new normal. All those things come together. So it's very simple to understand. The service industry is challenged, but it also is driven by information technology, the media, the virtual meetings, conference calls, telemedicine, virtual education. Then the sectors that are threatened are physical movement of people, because people now we are speaking now from different locations and we're seeing ourselves. We will not go back to the other time when we have to come to a hotel. We can have our AGMs all virtually and do things. So we will have a lot of physical interaction. But the cultural shock which affects Africa, it means that we have to now become more efficient. The problem with this is that because we have high unemployment and high population, a lot of our people are going to have to suffer because of immobility. Healthcare becomes a major area. Virtual education, right? Pharmaceuticals, preventive medicine, diagnosis, and all of that becomes an issue. Then agriculture, the production, and then the mobile payments. Whether we like it or not, we have to just open up that space for mobile payments to actually extract value from the efficiency of the payment system. The velocity of circulation of money in Nigeria is 5. The velocity of circulation can be 15, because a lot of trade, and if you invest in infrastructure, mobile money, and all of that, you'll find that if that happens, that will open up and actually unlock a lot of value that is locked in the payment system. So let's say that it's sectors that have the ability to adapt very quickly, innovate, and shed off with the problems they had with the structural issues of the past. That's what we see.
And lastly, 2 in 1, Mr. Bismark, what has been your experience being part of the Presidential Economy Advisory Committee? And do you have a projection for us of the growth of the economy to end the year 2020? Note that in first quarter, watching your 1.1%, but it was close to it.
No, first and foremost, the policy-making community in Nigeria has become more. I've accepted that we have problems, and I've accepted that we need solutions, and the solutions do not rely entirely within government. That's the thing. And our interaction at the Economic Policy Council is purely advisory, but it's impactful. Secondly, we are not deceiving ourselves that we'll be in negative growth this year, and deeply in negative growth. We're lucky to end the year at -4, -5%. That means if you take 5% of, you're talking about almost almost $20 billion worth of contraction. That's a whole lot. That's bigger than the economy. It's almost as big as the economy of Ghana. So that's the amount of contraction alone. How we deal with this. But the good news is that the recovery starts in 21. And the recovery, it's a U-shaped recovery. We get to the bottom, language for a while, and then we go right back up. So we are optimistic, but we are optimistic to the extent that we all have to work hard. If we think by sitting down and doing the same things that we did before, we'll get out of this, no, we're in for a shock. Thank you.
Those were interesting insights from Mr. Bismark Rewane as we looked at some interesting developments around the economy. Let's just give a recap of those things that we had discussed. From the monetary side, he was saying that the price mechanism and self-adjustment continues to be at the front burner for the monetary policy. Exchange rates has been managed for a long time, but has not had its impact. And definitely the advice from multilateral financial institutions for Nigeria to begin to unify becomes apt at this time because it will incentivize investors and also attract more diaspora remittances into the country, which we need at this time. Looking at the various advice again from World Bank, IMF around market-based reforms and policies, the market-determined exchange rates, the gas price adjustments, the electricity cost-reflective tariff, and of course removal of subsidies are going to lead to very robust structural changes in Nigeria's economy. And this would demand that Nigerians begin to adapt to the shocks. Like he said, if you have to take an injection to get well, if you delay it, you're delaying your health. So for Nigeria, we need that structural change with a tactical approach. And Nigeria must brace up for that. I know that labor unions and pro-statists will continue to debate this, but he believes that this is one step we must take if we're going to experience a structural transformation. In terms of economic models, because I've been engaging economists in the course of this show on what is the best economic philosophy or approach for Nigeria, he's looking at the mixed economic model where we're in the middle, because on the other side you have pro-statists, on the other hand you have the free markets. And he believes that we need to have a practical approach to economic management in Nigeria. And that also demands that government on its part provides the social safety nets, provides those necessary interventions for the poor and underprivileged, while on the other hand, the private sector can drive activities, drive investments in the economy, and support development where necessary. So a mixed economic model for Mr. Bismark Rewane is the best approach we should take. And in terms of looking at this year, I mean, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and who will be gainers or losers at this period, he calls for sectors to really begin to adapt and reinvent themselves. So whatever sector you find yourself is a time to adapt and reinvent. And looking at some sectors like technology, he believes those will be key drivers in this period. Healthcare, when you look at telemedicine, looking at pharmaceuticals, we're already seeing the impact of pharmaceuticals in the market. Those are sectors to watch. Virtual education, very critical at this time as the debate happens in Nigeria over whether schools should resume or not. Investment in virtual education will be very critical. Agro space continues to be very key because of food and food processing and of course feeding the nation. So those are sectors to watch that will need to reinvent themselves while every other sector should adapt and reinvent the activities. Of course, talking about his experience as a member of the Presidential Economic Advisory Council, he's saying that it's purely advisory and there's a lot to learn. But looking at Nigeria's growth level, because beginning of the year, and because of the pandemic, he had projected, the FDC had projected that Nigeria will grow at 1%, but of course, first quarter showed 1.87%. He's talking about the fact that yes, it's going to be negative growth. We'll be lucky, like he said, to end at minus 5%. But one thing he says that the contraction could hit $20 billion. The $20 billion contraction is huge and can be equated to Ghana's economy. You can imagine how huge that could be. But there are prospects of recovery in 2021. The key word is that Nigerians should brace up and that we should begin to see that things are going to change. There's a new normal and we have to adjust and make room for that. In terms of our budgeting process, of course, fiscal deficit, like he said, will increase in 2020. That's why we're going for funding through concessionary plans from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. So let's see how this goes through the year, and of course the Community Sustainability Plan, how it's managed. But those were very interesting insights from Mr. Bismark Rewane. And you can always watch that much later if you did not. Now let's go on to the summary of the National Bureau of Statistics. It carried out a survey on the COVID-19 and its impact on the economy, and there are some interesting summaries from it, including households. The first is that the vast majority of respondents in the survey practiced safety measures to minimize the risk of contracting the virus. 73% of respondents reported wearing a mask and 77% washing their hands most of the time after being in public. The most readily available COVID-19 preventive measure is washing one's hands with soap and water. However, insufficient access to soap and water for washing is a hindrance for some households, with 24% having insufficient soap and 7% insufficient water for washing hands. Between April, May, and June 2020, the share of respondents working increased in both urban and rural areas, reflecting the easing of the lockdown measures in the country. The commerce and services sectors, those hardest hit by the COVID-19 crisis, as well as the agricultural sector, experienced the largest recoveries in the share of respondents working. Those engaged in non-farm household businesses reported facing challenges associated with COVID-19. The most widely reported challenges faced by non-farm businesses were difficulty raising money, 87% of households owning non-farm businesses. There were also difficulty of buying and receiving supplies and inputs at 77%, and difficulties selling goods and services, that was 70%. Around 38% of households that engage in agriculture reported having to modify their farming plans due to COVID-19. Out of this, 52% reported reducing the area they planted, 30% planted crops that take less time to mature, and 25% reported delaying planting time. In June 2020, 30% of households reported that they experienced severe food insecurity due to lack of money and other resources. However, there was no significant increase in access to safety nets or other forms of support. A very interesting survey carried out by the National Bureau of Statistics. And just recently, the Central Bank of Nigeria made a move that has really caught the whole financial market in a lot of discussion and debate around it. And Silicon has written about this, and it was published on ProShare, and we just want to bring it to you. The Central Bank of Nigeria, like it said, moved a step ahead of bank loan defaulters with a new guideline that allows seizing of their funds in other accounts. According to the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, 105 debtors were responsible for about 4.5 trillion naira debt affecting the financial health of Nigeria's banking industry. What an amazing figure that's impacting the financial market. Accordingly, the Apex Bank's operational guidelines for Global Standard Instruction, GSI, allows financial institutions to assess funds of defaulting debtors that are deposited in other banks with effect from August 1st, 2020. The GSI, which is a mandate authorizing recovery of past due obligations from any and all deposit accounts maintained by defaulter, is limited to debt recovery only and is limited to only individual accounts. Although it can be used for recovery of repayment amounts, the GSI cannot be used to recover any additional fees, charges, or penal rates for defaults. In that circular issued by the Central Bank of Nigeria Director of Financial Policy and Regulation, Mr. Kevin Amogo, the GSI is targeted at facilitating an improved credit repayment system, reducing non-performing loans in the Nigerian banking system, and watchlisting consistent loan defaulters. The CBN, in collaboration with the stakeholders, had last year developed the necessary protocol to facilitate a seamless implementation of the GSI process, including eligible loans granted from August 28, 2019. Accordingly, it has issued the guideline to regulate the operations of the GSI, which will be implemented with effect from August 1st, 2020, as a way to enhance loan recovery across the banking sector. The guideline states that the GSI shall serve as a last resort by a creditor bank without recourse to the borrower to recover past due obligations, principal and accrued interest only, excluding any penal charges, from a defaulting borrower through a direct set-off from deposits, investments held in the borrower's qualifying bank accounts with participating financial institutions. To set up the mandate, customers will fill in their bank verification number, which is also known as BVN, while credit risk management system number, the full repayment amount, the loan duration, and the repayment account. The GSI is being maintained by the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System (NIPS), which is the custodian of BVN and holds record of all bank accounts in the country. Once the debtor defaults on a loan, the GSI is triggered with the creditor bank, activating the mandate on GSI module specifying the recovery amount. Once triggered, the available accounts for recovery are identified, available balances for the accounts are retrieved, and funds from the accounts according to recover logic are recovered. Participating financial institutions by the GSI mandate must honor all transactions from NIPS with a valid GSI mandate code. The GSI transactions can be triggered upon default on repayments 7 days after scheduled repayment date or before application of penal rates. Note that prior to now, ProShare, in partnership with Debtors Africa, had published one of the most robust reports and analysis on debtors in Nigeria and the financial market. And that was showing how important it is to end the tide of recalcitrant debtors who have refused to pay their debt. Just listen to the fact that 105 debtors owe about 4.5 trillion naira. That is not a good situation, and this is an appeal that in this period, recalcitrant debtors need to amend their ways to redeem the financial market. But this just goes to show again that from that Debtors Africa report analysis from ProShare and published by ProShare in partnership with Debtors Africa, analysis like that can also support regulatory interventions. And this time, there's no going back on ensuring that all loan defaulters, particularly the recalcitrant ones, will not go away scot-free, because the financial market will no longer experience the crisis and the challenge it faced between 2010 and 2011, where interventions had to be made because of recalcitrant debtors. Just to also take note this period to once again state that in this trying time of the nation, it calls for the policymakers in the country, institutions, to take transparency and accountability seriously. From the coalition against COVID-19, COVID, which has been mobilizing funds to address the pandemic, to other private sector-led interventions, and the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. We hear their work and we appreciate their efforts, but we call for more transparency in disclosures and also how those funds and donations are spent. Also, institutions, very, very critical institutions across the country must come to the table to deepen transparency. State-owned enterprises like the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation, Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Company, the Office of the Accountant General of the Federation, Office of the Auditor General of the Federation, Office of the Attorney General of the Federation, regional development agencies like the Niger Delta Development Commission, even the major anti-graft agencies like the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and the Independent Corrupt Practices and Other Related Offences Commission offices. They are the institutions that have to continue to anchor on transparency and accountability, because without this, our country will continue to go through challenges, because where there's no accountability from institutions that are supposed to be anchors of that, it creates room for unnecessary crisis, which we cannot bear at this point. So this is a word to institutions that it is time for more transparency and accountability, and they must not let that ball down. And that will be a wrap for the Economy and Politics show for this very special Wednesday, July 15, 2020. Please send your comments and views to news@prochange.com, and you can join our website, www.prochange.com, to watch our videos, read our news reports and analysis. Don't forget, by 10 a.m. we have the market review, where we give you updates and developments in the financial and capital market as it relates to the economy. To come your way again, whatever political economic debate you find yourself engaged in, make sure it is constructive and productive. Thank you for watching. Have a nice time and stay safe.